let's talk about the movie Imaginary. Imaginary is the story of a young girl named Alice. She's part of a mixed family. Dad is a musician, Max, and he's married the love of his life after tragedy befell his previous wife. She went mad, let's just say. And he marries Jessica, played by DeWanda Wise. They're a mixed family. There are problems. Taylor is sort of a bitchy teenager. Alice is a young girl. She's, like 8, 9 years old. And they move into a new house together. Well, it's not a new house because it's actually Jessica's childhood home that she inherits from her father. And they move into this new home. And the home has some dark secrets that will be revealed. Alice ends up having an imaginary friend. Who is her imaginary friend? Chauncey, a little teddy bear. And it's all very innocent. They play tea party, they talk to each other. And Chauncey makes a list of things that ends up being a scavenger hunt. And some of the things on the list for the scavenger hunt are pretty dark. Things begin to spiral as this imaginary friend begins to intrude, not just on Alice, but everyone else in the family, to the point where dark things are afoot, including a secret door in the basement. I don't know if you like, when I was a kid, to me, the basement was scary. Everything in the basement from the furnace made noises that sounded like a monster. Basements are scary. It ends up opening a gateway to a parallel world filled with imaginary friends that are monsters terrorizing and stealing children. Now, the movie is PG-13, but I'll say this. If a child saw this movie, I'm saying like anyone, under the age of like 13, they will be terrified. This is like the most horrifying episode of Goosebumps you'll ever see. So to me, it's like, I would describe it as like a starter horror film for a young fan of horror. If you want to scare the hell out of a young kid, take them to Imaginary. And don't get it confused with IF, which is Imaginary Friend. That's the movie starring Ryan Reynolds. Completely different movie. And it's weird.
So what makes this too intense for children?
Because the Chauncey, they say there's two types of scares. One scare is a jump scare. This movie has a lot of jump scares. Some I would say are kind of cheap, but then the other scares are like something you see is going to happen. The audience sees that something is about to happen, but the characters on screen do not see what's going to happen. So it's like this slow build, like a ticking bomb. It's going to go off. Something bad's going to happen. Look, this is a decent horror film that if you're a longtime horror fan, you're going to like, oh, that's all right. It's PG-13. For a kid, will be terrified, because what it does is, I think it taps into fears of children. What are things that are scary for kids, right? Things involving parents being alone or separated, right? The basement, like some of these things are just primal fears. Like, I believe there's something primal in our lizard brain, which explains certain types of movies where, like, being chased by a threat is something that's in our lizard brains. It's in a lot of movies, right? You're being chased by the monster, the serial killer, the zombie, whatever. I believe that, like, in our lizard brains, when we weren't so civilized, we were chased by things trying to murder us as humans. So somehow there's like something tapped in our lizard brain, like a fight or flight mechanism, that when we feel threatened, we'll either run away or fight. And this movie kind of taps into a lot of those primal fears, and then also fears of children, losing a parent. That's a fear of a child. The basement, the dark, what's under the bed. And so that's why I say this movie is like a horror film for kids, because the types of scary things that are in the movie are the things that children would find scary. It does, I'll say this, and without, I'm not going to give anything away, but I'll tell you one thing. The trailer does a really good job of not telling you what happens in the second half of the movie,
Oh, that's good.
which is, for once, the trailer showed restraint, because there's a doorway that leads to, I'm not going to even describe, just like there's a doorway that leads to bad places. And that's it. And so that's like the second half of the film, and it gets freaking weird. The trailer just sort of focuses on like Chauncey the scary teddy bear. That's
Yeah.
just
Well, yeah, you get the
one.
idea. You get the
You
idea.
get the idea.
That whole nail thing.
Oh God, the nail thing is bad.
I mean,
where
that's
she's
in the
gonna, like,
trailer, and that's
step
just like,
on a
oh,
nail. Yeah.
yeah.
She's gonna step on a nail, something that hurts, right? It's like a rusty nail from a fence. And I look at that and I'm like, oh my God, no. And it's a little girl too. I mean, just like the dad instinct in me is just like, protect. So all the
Well,
things
just the
happening.
nail thing. To me.
Yeah. I'll just say the second half of the movie gets really weird, really weird. And I'll say that, like, look, if you have like a young, like a daughter, son, whatever, who's interested in horror, take them to this, because, I look at, like, you can't unsee certain horror films you see at a certain age, right? But this is like the perfect movie to take. Oh, you like horror films? Okay, let's go see this movie Imaginary about a teddy bear. It's like it really does a good job of that.
What did you
So
think when we talked to the director on Wednesday, and just the stat of that horror films are predominantly women.
I hadn't realized that, but I do. I think that makes sense to me. That a lot of women are horror fans, and I'll say this: like, look, this is why horror as a genre is so popular, and it performs so solidly. One, horror fans, and I've been going to Monsterpalooza for years. Monsterpalooza and Son of Monsterpalooza. One's in Burbank, one's in Pasadena. I always go to it. It's super fun, and horror films are like a great, like, if you're young and going on a date, horror films are great because what it does is, and I've heard people in horror talk about this, it gets the blood pumping because it taps into lizard brain stuff like fear, and that, like, heightens, your adrenaline and all this. And I have heard horror filmmakers say horror films turn women on. They actually get it. There's an arousal factor to it. So that's why I think that it's like, that's why you see, like, teenagers going on a date. Hey, go see a horror movie. It's like a,
I was gonna go. Some of my best dates were at Not Scary Farm.
There you go. Not Scary Farm. Yeah. Like, that's all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, I was surprised when he said it, but then it totally makes sense to me. It totally makes sense. So yeah, I mean, why do you think women love true crime documentaries? There's a weird fascination with the macabre, right?
Or they look at the killer and think, "Hey, I could change him."
Right, I can change him. But yeah, no, I recommend Imaginary. I'd say like a decent, like a solid 6.5, like a decent horror film. You gotta know, it does dance right up to that PG-13 line. I mean, right up to it. And it doesn't cross it, but it could have been. There's a lot of things that happen off screen that, if you use your imagination when you're watching Imaginary, it's pretty dark stuff, but a great horror film to bring a kid to, because they'll probably sleep with the lights on.